I'm gonna call my parents to let them know what's up. I know they'll be there. I'll see about getting in touch with George too. If we're lucky, we might get a full house. His mouth cracked into a fond smile. This'll be quick. You won't even miss me. Or maybe you will. I wouldn't mind that. You teasingly shoo them away. I won't be able to if you don't go. Get to it. True.
Right.
Satisfied, Derek pulled his phone out and brought it to his ear. He began to walk away in preparation for the talk. Since he was busy with that, you decided to return to your guest room. You considered freshening up by changing. Tapping your fingers on the top of the bag, you cycled through the options in your mind, but nothing felt right. Eventually, you settled on using the bathroom and splashing some water on your face instead. As you crossed the apartment, you peeked over at Derek. There was no way that you could know what was being said, but he shot you an exaggerated thumbs up. You took that as a strong sign that all was going well. You threw your fists into the air, mouthing a silent yes. The way Derek's lips twisted, you could tell that he was trying very hard not to burst into laughter on the phone. It wasn't very long before your visit was properly arranged. The calls were ended, and you were leaving the apartment behind. Derek hesitated at the door and tapped it at his bottom lip. He was double-checking his mental checklist, but that too wasn't resolved in short order. You both stepped out into the hall, and this time he remembered to lock the door before he dashed down the hall. Hopping into his car, you promptly took off. The drive was lively. You spent it taking turns telling each other new stories about your families and your latest personal adventures. Thanks to slow-moving traffic, it was a 20-minute drive to reach his parents' new place. Derek pulled in and automatically noted how lucky you were that this condo had guest spots. Nodding along, you followed as he enthusiastically showed you the way. Derek knocked solidly, but not loudly, on the door. They knew you were coming. It didn't take you by surprise when the door almost immediately pulled open. Mrs. Suarez joyfully greeted you both. Hi, welcome home. Without a second thought, she wrapped her eldest into her arms. Derek gladly hugged her back with the same vigor. Hey, Mom.
Good to see you.
It's so good to see you. And Faye too. She ushered you two inside, and you got your first look around. The Suarez's had moved there a couple years ago, but you'd never gotten to visit until now. It was still just as homey and comfortable as their old apartment. When you traveled further inside, you spotted Mr. Suarez sitting at the kitchen table with a chilled drink. He took a slow, drawn-out sip, and then he placed the cup down and got up to join everyone else. He stood in front of you like you were a newly arrived audience, pointed at his wife, and tattled. Mom made me promise not to get the door. She wanted to be the one to answer. Mrs. Suarez was unapologetic and owned up to her actions entirely. She went over to her husband and soothingly rubbed his back. Thanks for being such a good sport about it. Of course, but I get to have my greeting now. Doing exactly as he promised, Mr. Suarez turned from his wife to you and Derek, the two guests in his home. He pushed his glasses higher up his nose. Hello, kids. I'm happy you came early. I couldn't ask for better visitors. It's great to see you too. You held your hand out to shake as you spoke. Mr. Suarez let out a booming laugh at your offer and then immediately clasped your hand. He enthusiastically shook it. It's always tough when our kids are gone, but we certainly missed having you running around with them. Yes, it hasn't been the same without you. Okay. Derek clapped his hands together and you couldn't help but smirk. The image reminded you so much of his mom trying to bring order to her rambunctious sons. And speaking of... So where are the bros? It is the same as always. You arrived first. It made sense that to you that you'd beaten George there. He had to rearrange his day on the fly to make it, but why wasn't Nico there? Your eyebrows raised in surprise. You didn't have to ask for an explanation. Mrs. Suarez gabbed about it in an intentionally overdramatic tone. This is my question each day. Nico is never home with me anymore. Now that school's out, he travels into the city as soon as he gets up and only comes back in the evening for dinner. A mother's gloom over her baby growing up was given its silver lining by the father.
Yes.
He's independent.
Maybe.
He is usually, but Mrs. Suarez had held her cell phone up and her lips curled into a mischievous grin. She added a wink when she shifted her attention to you. I might have sent a text that you two are coming by. I'm sure that'll get his attention. He'll get his butt back here sooner rather than later for a change. Right. It struck you then by Derek's understanding tone that none of this was news to him. They were explaining Nico's habits for your sake. The whole family was as polite as they were perceptive. Since we've got time, why don't you show Faye the condo?
Let's go.
I was about to suggest the same thing. What do you think, Faye? Want to take a tour? I do. Show me everything. Similarly to what Derek had done earlier that day, his parents led you through the highlights of their new home. Mr. Suarez proudly listed all the amenities the complex offered outside as well. Derek leisurely followed along behind the group, loosely listening to the fact list. He had a few notes to add here and there. Sometimes later a phone interrupted the conversation with a loud ding. Oh, sorry, that's me. He partially shifted the phone out of his loose pocket and checked for any important news. He beamed victoriously and let his phone slide back into the dips.
Nice.
George is here. And with good timing, the tour was complete. Let us go meet Junior. The current group left the hall behind and crowded back into the living room, ready for the party to grow in size. As you got there, you heard a firm and even-paced string of knocks on the door. Mr. Suarez eagerly shouted over the sound. My turn.
All right.
Fair's fair. Cheerily. Mr. Suarez jaunted off and swung the door wide open, knowing that his middle son was on the other side. And he was, although George Jr. Suarez was hardly a junior anymore. George had not only grown taller than his big brother, but he also towered over his parents. Your jaw would have been on the floor if Derek hadn't mentioned this earlier. Still, from his neat sandy brown hair, his calm expression and relaxed stance, you knew that he was still the same boy you knew as a kid. George also remained a placid presence in his rambunctious family. They cheered at his arrival, and he smiled sweetly.
Hello.
I hope I didn't keep you waiting. Welcome home, Junior. Don't worry about that. You didn't take long at all. Derek struck when George was distracted by their parents. He hooked an arm around his brother's neck and pulled him close. George hugged Derek to his side. So Derek's already here, huh? Yeah, I am. Never would have guessed that. The brothers let go and gave each other one last light shove. George went over to you next.
Hey.
Faye, it's been a while. I missed you. You offered him a high five. George's mouth hooked into a warm, crooked grin at that. He earnestly reached over and slapped you. Ditto. You noticed the remaining rigidness left from George's frame. He snagged a drink from the kitchen and settled in. He was joined there by the others, and he recounted his days so far. Eventually, you all heard the distinct sound of the doorknob jingling and then turning. No knocking was required for this one. There was only one person it could be, the last to arrive for the gathering and the last to have been born, Nicholas. The door popped open with a swish, and you saw that you were undeniably right. It was Nico, but his appearance had your brows pinching. He was extremely different, yet simultaneously so similar to the tiny 6-year-old you had first met him as. Somehow his hair managed to be even wilder than when he was an elementary school kid. But besides that, he'd become a young man despite continuing to be a baby in your mind's eye. He was sporting a colorful rainbow romper that was fashionable as it was functional, as well as his iconic hair clips to round out the mix of old and new. Nicholas is back. With a roll of his eyes, Nicholas animatedly gestured and held his arms out. You bit back an amused laugh. No, I live here. That's not news. News is that Derek and Faye are back. He bounced over and managed to securely lock himself around his big brother's wide chest. Derek wrapped an arm across his brother's shoulder in response. Derek ruffled Nicholas' long, thick hair before letting him go. It was sweet that the gesture of affection between them hadn't changed, though Derek didn't have to lean down to do it anymore. Hello, son. Thank you for coming. Walking by, Nicholas gave a short wave to his parents and then elbowed George charmingly as his hello. George teasingly retaliated with a poke to his little brother's side. Finally, Nicholas stopped in front of you. Hey, Faye, welcome back to Casa Suarez. I'm so glad to see you again. You offered a high five. Same. He hit you with a loud slap, impressed. You shook the sting from your hand and whistled. Well, you got strong. Now the whole Suarez family plus you was together again, Mr. Suarez admiringly looked at his wife and then his sons. He securely hooked his fingers into his belt loops.
That's good.
This is very good. Yes, I wonder if everyone here will be coming back tomorrow as well.
Of course.
Of course, Dad. Faye and I are gonna be here for sure. I might manage to work it into my busy schedule. Also,
What do you
while
think?
we're talking about tomorrow, that reminds me, I wanted to ask if it'd be alright for Mr. Holden to join us for Father's Day. It could be a joint party with us and Faye's family. Oh, Cliff, that would be quite an event. I'd be happy to have the company.
I think
Yeah, I figured, but I wanted to ask first. We'll invite him when we go down to Faye's neighborhood later. Thank you so much. Your excitement accidentally increased the volume of your thanks. Mr. Suarez cracked an entertained smile and then let out a booming laugh.
that is all
The more
right.
the merrier, as Mr. Holden himself might say. I already can't wait for tomorrow.
Wonderful.
That's exactly what I wanted for the day.
Well,
And you curiously peeked at Derek and watched him shifted his feet oddly. A tinkle of excitement started coming of him, and you realized what he had in mind. Since we're here, Faye and I have gotta tell you something. You're in a relationship. Dad,
is that
what?
wrong?
Is that wrong? Were we not aware of what Derek felt about Faye? Mrs. Suarez groaned loudly and hid her face in the palms of her hands. George put his hands on his hips, giving his dad a hard look. Maybe, maybe not. We have no idea. Don't steal their thunder before they've said anything. He's right, Gregory. He's right, Gregory. Let them talk. Mr. Suarez stroked his beard thoughtfully. Oh, sorry, kids.
Go on.
Derek, please keep going. What did you want to say?
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Forget I said a word. My lips are sealed. Derek shot you a look that was both apologetic and encouraging. He turned back to the waiting eye of his family and scratched his cheek. He reached over and took Derek's hand. Derek started, but when his brain caught up to what you were doing, his palm slid perfectly into place with yours. You watched his expression grow more confident. He was ready.
You know it.
You got it, Dad. We're dating. The soft way he confirmed that made your heart flutter in your chest. I'm more than happy to say it, even though someone else beat me to the punch. Mrs. Suarez was instantly elated by that news. She started clapping and knocked a shoulder into her husband's side.
Very
I hope
good.
that was going to be the news. This is amazing and quite a surprise too. George slowly shook his head and laughed. His crooked smile grew.
That makes
You
sense.
two together. It just makes sense. I'm happy for you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
This means everything to me. I'm officially Team Suarez now. You were excited to have them rooting for you and Derek. There was no better group to be a part of. Breathing slowly, steadier now that the hard part was over, it suddenly struck you that someone had been uncharacteristically quiet. The audience had only consisted of 3 out of 4 members of Derek's family. Nicholas had nothing to say, or nothing he was willing to mention out loud. Before you could pass that observation on to Derek, his subdued expression showed that he was aware. That actually didn't surprise you. He was never one to ignore his little brother. Nicholas hung behind the crowd. Derek maintained eye contact with him. Since there was nowhere to hide, Nicholas plastered a smile on his face. But he still wouldn't speak. Derek was equally quiet. There was everything there, and he wasn't going to open that can of worms in front of everyone. Instead, he glanced down, and your presence chased his worries away. His joyful excitement reignited. You followed Derek's lead and allowed yourself to be happy. There would be plenty of opportunities later to talk everything out with Nicholas. The rest of Derek's family continued to voice their sincere encouragement of your relationship before letting the conversation calm down and shift. Things returned to the usual comfort you enjoyed when you were with the Suarezes. Mr. and Mrs. Suarez provided lunch. It was nice for the whole family to be sitting at one busy table. But afterwards, Derek announced that you two should hit the road. I'm gonna get going, too. I've still got a class later. Are you serious? We've barely done anything. Sorry, Nico. We gotta take the trip out of Sunset Bird before it gets any later. Fine. Me, you, and George are doing something together and not the Father's Day thing, okay? Something that's gonna be fun with just us. Sighing affectionately, Mrs. Suarez shared a look with her snickering husband. Nicholas was going through the iconic parents are uncool teen face.
Don't worry.
Don't worry. I made sure to have that whole day free. I promised to come over later, early. Derek tilted his head towards you, silently asking your opinion before agreeing to anything. I'd love to hang with those boys.
I swear.
Cool. Got that? We'll both be there. Count on it. We can do whatever Nico wants in the afternoon, and then it'll be Dad's pick in the evening. Alright, see you then. And with that settled, everyone exchanged their goodbyes and see you soons. You and Derek left in good spirits. You hopped back into his car, already eager for home. Sunset Bird was waiting for you. During the drive, you sent off a text to let your moms know that you were coming by soon. They knew you were arriving today, but they had no idea when you were going to be free to come see them. You also sent a text to Mr. Holden telling him that you'd be in the neighborhood today. He texted back right away that he'd be home and keeping an eye out for visitors. You could already tell that Mr. Holden was thrilled at the prospect. Humming to himself, Derek sped down the highway. The city's skyscrapers were far behind you in the distance, and there was nothing but rolling hills on greens. It was strange to be sitting shotgun with Derek after all the years of your friendship being trapped in the long-distance zone, but at the same time it also wasn't. What was arguably stranger was how his presence affected you. Having him there by your side was the most normal thing in the world to you. Soon enough, you began to recognize the landmarks dotting the way to your hometown. Excitement buzzed under your skin. You were ready to get back home. The car flew past the now leaving sign, and you rolled down the window to wave at it. Officially, you were finally back in Sunsetburg. It didn't take more than a few minutes to drive through the rest of the town and roll into the sleepy neighborhood where you grew up. Derek parked along the curb and you both slid out.
Nice
We
work.
made it, safe and sound. Derek leisurely leaned on his car. He looked over the roof at you and lifted a questioning brow. So, what do you want to do first? See your mom's or go check on Mr. Holden? Let's visit Mr. Holden first. If he's not there, then we can try again after seeing my mom's. And if he's there now, there's a chance he might not be when we're done with the other visit. Sounds reasonable to me. Together you crossed the street and walked up to the familiar door. It was still a little odd remembering that the condo was now only inhabited by one single Holden. You rang the doorbell and waited. Luckily, the familiar face of Mr. Holden appeared in the doorway and beamed at you at seeing you.
Hey,
Hi. Derek gave a big wave that Mr. Holden returned cheerfully until his brain caught up enough to let him speak. You're here. We arrived in one piece.
Come on.
That's great. Come on in. He waited for you two to follow inside. You did, and he glanced back over his shoulder to address you further. So, what can I do for you today? Well, now that you mentioned it, I was wondering if you're busy tomorrow.
Oh?
I'll be getting a call from my boy, but that's about it. Why? Do you want to go to the Suarez house for Father's Day with us? Do I? What? His jaw hung open. Mr. Holden placed a hand on his chest with a thumb, giving himself a bit of a jump start. Really? Do you want me to come for Father's Day? Yes, I'd love it if you joined us tomorrow. Faye is right. My family loves you, and he paused, glancing over at you. Derek knew how much this invitation meant. You are important to everyone that will be there, so would you join us? You could see the tears start to form in Mr. Holden's eyes. He was trying with great difficulty not to get too emotional.
Okay.
Then I'll be there. Just tell me when and where.
it's no problem.
I'll text you the details later tonight. Great. Mr. Holden shifted uncomfortably on his feet. He was still feeling overwhelmed by the situation, but he shyly faced you. I hope you've been doing well. Things couldn't be better these days. Agreed.
How's it
Glad to
going?
hear that. And your moms, are they doing alright? I haven't actually seen them yet. We're going there next. Oh, could I tag along? I've been meaning to visit them, and it'd be nice to stick with you two a little while longer. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Let's move this party across the street. Nothing else needed to be said after that. The newly arranged group pivoted out the door and strolled right over to your childhood home. Without missing a beat, you located and rang the oddly placed doorbell. Ma expectantly answered the door. Her eyes sparkled and landed on you immediately.
Hi.
Hello, sweetie. And Derek, welcome. A few seconds later, she realized there was a third, less anticipated guest at her doorstep. She tried biting back her giggles with less success. "Oh, and hello to you, stranger." "Hey there," the kid swung by, "and I thought I'd visit too. What a lovely surprise." Come in, come in." Ma stepped aside, grinning widely. She held the door all the way open so everyone could hurry in through. Mom's voice rang out from the hall right before she appeared physically in front of you. She excitedly stopped
Nice.
at her wife's side.
Nice.
"What a great crowd." "I'm home." You threw your arms around both of them. Excitedly, you pulled them into a big hug. You could feel one of them soothingly rubbing circles into your back. "You sure are, kiddo." Derek gently worked his way into the conversation. You didn't miss the way his skin was suddenly a shade rosier than before.
Good to see you.
"Thanks, Mrs. and Mrs. Madison, for letting me come by too. It's nice to see you again."
You're fantastic.
"You don't need to thank us for that. You can come over anytime. You're an excellent guest."
That's fantastic.
"Yes, and we need to thank you for giving our Faye a place to stay. Now we'll get to visit with her even more this summer." They shared a knowing look with their eyes alight. They had to be thinking of their big anniversary later in the season. You'd be coming back to Sunsetburst for that. You didn't mind all the traveling. It was worth it. "Good point. Happy almost anniversary." "Thank you. That's gonna be a night to be remembered, I'm sure." "I bet. We're going to have a nice little shindig at the Cypress." "But what's shaking? You've been busy, huh?" There was certainly a lot going on in your and Derek's lives. You had an inkling of what was once again coming to mind first for Derek. His body went stiff, and it was obvious that for once he was struggling to find what to say. Understandably, Derek wasn't as confident in front of your family as he was with his own. He knew with his own family that he'd be supported unconditionally, but here there was an underlying fear that he might not be good enough for this audience. You break the news yourself. You wanted Derek to know without a doubt that you weren't the only one here that adored him. Stepping forward, you felt your heartbeat skip. Well, speaking of what we've done, me and Derek are a couple now. The confidence you mustered started to falter the second the words left your mouth. You nervously lowered your head. "I'm really happy about it." It took a second for the news to register, but it hit like a string of dominoes. Both of your mom's eyes went wide with surprise, and then Mr. Holden's did too. Mom bent forward with a soft chuckle and loudly snorted.
It happens.
"I thought this might happen ever since Faye invited him to that soiree, remember?" Ma hummed nostalgically. She reached over and threaded her fingers together with Mom's.
Yes.
"Derek has always been quite the gentleman." It didn't escape our notice that Derek has had an interest in our Fae long enough for us to know he means it.
True.
It's true, he's a keeper. Faye is an excellent kid, and I know for a fact that Derek is a great guy. I'm sure things are gonna work out for two. And with that, Derek let out a relieved breath. You were ready to steady him out of worry, and he might fall over with the release of his inner worries. But he brightened with a bold grin. He exuded so much confidence that you could almost believe the former tension never happened. Thanks, I appreciate it more than I can try to describe. You bet. She reassuringly went over to Derek and patted his arm. Her gaze affectionately moved between you and him. The two of you are responsible adults and know what's right for you. If being together is it, then I just wish you both the best. Ma came forward and clasped Derek's hand. Thank you for always treating our daughter so well.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Even as friends, I'd never wanna do wrong by Faye. You shifted your attention to Mr. Holden for his opinion next. He proudly gave you a thumbs up.
Absolutely.
The two of you ladies hit the nail on the head. Thanks.
Now.
Come now and tell us about how it all happened. We need the details. The group relaxed and hung out in the living room. Each person shared updates from the past and plans for the future. It went on until the sun began to set. At that point, you and Derek decided that it was best to leave sooner rather than later. The end of the visit was accepted with grace. Bye. Thanks again for coming to see us.
Take care.
Tell Mr. Suarez Happy Father's Day for us.
I gotcha.
From us. We'll be sure to do that. Mr. Holden remained in his seat. He had already planned on visiting with your moms a little while later.
See you.
Take care. I'll see the two of you tomorrow. Bye. Great seeing you. With that, you stepped out into the warm embrace of the evening air. Leaving that house, going onto that street, it was something you'd done countless times. Believing how much the context of that action had changed was hard. You were only here on a visit, and your boyfriend Derek Suarez had joined you. A true twist on the story of older days. Derek followed you out, but didn't go to his car. Instead, he stepped into the center of the road and stayed there. His gaze wandered up the hill and past that off into the distance. He spoke with a voice as comforting as the familiar song of crickets. Hey, before we go, could we stretch our legs a bit? There's one other thing I want to do while we're here. Don't have to ask me twice. Lead the way.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Derek tilted his head in the direction he wanted to go, his mouth hooked into a grin, and then he started strolling. You followed at his side. He gently slipped his fingers around yours. It made your heart flutter joyfully. Derek moved with wide, carefree strides. You giggled as your linked hands swung with each step. You found yourself headed outside of the residential area of Sunset Bird and onto the main street. It had been nice to refamiliarize yourself with the area during the little jaunt. Derek got a conversation going between you. Well, damn. That went better than I expected. With our families, though, even saying it even saying it out loud to them still hasn't made it feel totally real yet. There's no way you're actually dating me, I think. You better start believing it, 'cause it's real, 'cause it's true. We owe it to ourselves to give this a shot. Derek cracked a smile before letting his gaze fall to the ground. The conversation swung on that note. The walk continued, and you had a good idea of where he was going at that point. There was something coming up in the middle of the path, and it wouldn't hold any interest to anyone other than you, Derek, and Cove. For the three of you, it was special. Derek crouched down to the ground right where you expected. He smiled wistfully at a decade-old inscription. The writing was well worn, but still visible. He slowly placed his finger over the small print he'd left in the concrete as a 13-year-old. He was so much larger than he used to be. His finger completely eclipsed it, the tiny mark, and yet he seemed small again to you in that moment. Next, Derek moved to the initials you had made. He dragged his fingertip over to carefully trace it. There was something on his mind that swept him miles away all of a sudden. You had no idea what it could be, and that uncertainty left a sour taste on your tongue. Derek remained transfixed with the
This sucks.
concrete and his own internal musing. Gradually, his frown worsened.
This sucks.
Time is a sucky thing to play against. If you mess up, that's it. Even if you try to turn things around later, you're not getting what you lost back. It's just gone. Do you think you messed something up? He chuckled, but it was farthest thing from being reassuring. You nervously chewed at the inside of your cheek.
I've really messed
I've
up.
messed up a lot of things. That was all that came of it. Derek pushed off the ground and got back on his feet. He brushed some dirt off and took his phone out. He got a picture of himself giving a thumbs up in front of the concrete slab. A solemn air around him vanished.
Okay.
I'm gonna text this to Cole. You laughed. The change in topic nearly knocked you over. Genuine amusement seemed to be boosting his mood, and so you decided to let whatever was bothering him go for now. You caught Derek's gaze wandering off again. He hummed thoughtfully, and you followed his eyeline to the local store across the street.
Oh, man.
I just remembered I'm still low in groceries. We could journey over there. We could, but I'm worried things could go bad on the drive back to the apartment. Plus, it's been a super long day already. How about we pick something up for dinner and save the shopping for tomorrow, my treat? How could I say no to that? I vote for takeout. Awesome. Think about what you're in the mood for and let's get going. Together, you eagerly went back to the way you came. This time, you got in the car and drove out of Sunset Bird once more.